What's the craziest way you caught your ex cheating? My friend found out his girlfriend was cheating on him when he came home to find some dude, all bare, dead on his bed, an ambulance arriving, and his girlfriend sobbing in her bathrobe. Turns out the guy was deathly allergic to something my friend always eats, and the girl gave it to the guy and he ate it and choked to death. His girlfriend was devastated while I helped my friend clean up. He then threw all her stuff out and locked the door after the ambulance left, since a lot are asking. I'm not going to specify the allergy. It's a food, but not something widely or commonly eaten where and when this happened. I doubt he even knew he was allergic to that food item. His cod was determined to be an allergic reaction, and that's all I was told. She wasn't charged with anything since no one wanted what happened to be known in public. The bed and mattress were cleaned, he couldn't afford to buy new ones at the time. Story 2. She told me she was going on vacation with her family. She didn't take her phone, only her little laptop, which I had given her. She said roaming charges were too expensive. This was the early 2000s in Europe, so we'd communicate by email. A week passed, and she came back. The first time we were intimate, she started crying. When I asked what was wrong, she said nothing, just that she had missed me so much. I believed her, but something still felt off because she was acting strangely after the trip. I installed a keylogger on my computer, which she regularly used to access Facebook whenever she was at my place. One day, after I got home from work, I logged into her Facebook account and found a conversation with the guy she'd spent the week with. Her entire family had covered for her. Then I read one message where the guy apologized because he couldn't satisfy her. At that moment, my phone rang. It was my girlfriend asking me to bring her breakfast because she'd forgotten hers. I told her I would. I quickly bought her the cutest donut I could find, brought it to her workplace, and asked her how it was that she couldn't reach the Big O during the vacation. I've never seen someone's face turn so red. The first thing she asked was, "Who told you?" Right there, I broke up with her. She cried, shook with panic, and asked, "Why are you doing this to me?" We had been together for 6 years. Story 3. Not me, but in university I shared a rental house with a girl we can call Julia. The guy she had been dating since high school lived basically next door as well. I worked at a bar, she was a cocktail waitress at a restaurant owned by a pair of brothers, and we would often meet in the living room at 2 a.m. for a nightcap and tell mad stories. One night, her restaurant had a big promotional party for some tequila brand, and she tells me how over the course of the evening, she gave one brother a HJ and one brother a blowy. What she didn't realize was that her BlackBerry had butt-dialed her boyfriend and left a voicemail of the entire thing. The next morning, he burst through the door raging, and I felt like I had to stay in my room till the fight was over. I didn't want to leave in case it got too heated. She ended up married to the blowy brother, so all's well that ends well, I suppose. Story 4. Long story short. I was somehow convinced to take back an ex I had history with years prior, after I initially turned her down. A few years of no contact, we crossed paths, started talking as friends again, and after a few deep discussions, I fell for the bait. Only 3 weeks into having the relationship label, she cheats on me the night I get stuck doing a mandatory double at work due to a call-off. At work, she sent me an explicit picture and asked me to stop on break, but I couldn't due to not having enough time. The next morning, I go to her place and stop by a couple who lives in her apartment building, whom I know. Basically, a dude spent the night at her place and left shortly before I arrived. When I got to her place, I played stupid and asked her if one of her stalkers, guys she was leading on, was bothering her. It went as follows. A friend stopped by, an ex-boyfriend stopped over. He only stayed for 10 minutes. He stayed over but slept on the couch. We slept in the same bed but didn't do anything. To eventually, we did it, but it wasn't my fault. I was feeling hypersexual, but you weren't there for me. No yelling or anything. I kept my cool and just told her we're done and to lose my number. I blocked her on everything before I even got in my car. I actually started cracking up laughing on my drive home for being such an idiot for taking her back. The craziest part is that about a month later, I found out from other people that she was posting me all over social media, including those Facebook groups, warning other women about me. All these ridiculous lies about me apparently beating her and other BS that made me look like some violent lunatic. She even lied about our breakup. Her version was that she dumped me. I didn't want to be dumped, so I beat her up, smashed all her dishes, and then the cops took me out in handcuffs. 100% lies, besides never being arrested or touching her that way at all. We actually never had a real fight or anything both times we dated. Story 5. We were driving through town, she had just moved there, and near the train station she pointed at a pub. She asked me, "Is that place a hotel? Like, can you stay there? It's pretty close to the train station." I said, "Yeah, it's a pub with a hotel attached," and thought nothing more of it for about a week. Then, all of a sudden, that conversation popped back into my head. Why the hell was she asking about a hotel and why specifically mention the train station? I couldn't shake the feeling even though I had never suspected she was cheating. One day, while she was at work, I used my computer and realized she was still logged into her email. I had never snooped before, but I needed to know. This was years ago when email was a common way to communicate. There was nothing in her inbox that suggested anything, but when I clicked on her sent folder, there were tons of emails she'd sent to some guy. It turned out she'd met him in the city one night while out with her friends. They had been talking about meeting up, and he asked her where there was a place to stay close to the train station. I printed one of the emails and left it on the bed for her to find. When she got home, I deliberately left the room and let her read it. She came up with every excuse under the sun about why it wasn't her fault, and insisted they had never actually met. But that was enough for me. I kicked her to the curb. Story 6. She was working part-time as a server at an Applebee's, and one day she told me she was moving to another location due to her and a coworker getting into several arguments. Whatever, not a huge deal. The night that she worked her first shift at that new location, my cousin texts me and asks me to call her. She had just met my girlfriend and told me she wasn't moved due to her and someone else having disagreements. It was because she was doing it with her manager. I didn't know my cousin worked there, so obviously my girlfriend didn't know, so she decided to begin telling her new coworker all about why she moved stores, how her boyfriend didn't know, that she knew it was a mistake, and she loved her boyfriend so much. One thing led to another, and she asked my cousin her last name, and of course it's the same as mine. My cousin asks what her boyfriend's name is, and she says it's my name, and my cousin just left it at that. And when she got a second, she contacted me. I waited until my soon-to-be ex-girlfriend got out of work before I called her and asked her if she met my cousin who worked there, and she immediately began denying it. That my cousin was lying and more. I just hung up on her. And later that week took the stuff she had at my house over to her parents' house. Story 7. I was in college for psychology. I was sitting in my boyfriend's house studying. He was in the kitchen making himself something to eat. I had to go to the bathroom down the hall at the same time he was coming out of the kitchen, and his mom was coming down the hall as well. We all met in a weird triangle where the 3 rooms intersected. His mom said so-and-so called, and then turned around and walked back to her room. He immediately got that deer-in-headlights look on his face, and I instantly knew what he had done. I had known he had gone out and hung out with his female friend the night before, so his mom bringing her up shouldn't have caused his reaction. It should have been no big deal. I have always been fine with guys having female friends. I have a lot of male friends, so I get it. I am not the jealous type, so for him to look that scared simply because of mentioning a friend I was fully aware of and knew he had hung out with the night before tipped me off. I waited until his mom got back to her room and asked, "What did you do?" He started stuttering. I said I would figure out what he wanted to say if he told me, then walked back to my books, threw them in my book bag and left. I walked home and the phone was already ringing. I answered, and he started trying to tell me some BS story. I said, "Don't call me again until you're ready to tell me the truth," and hung up. He called back, and now the story was slightly changed, but I knew it was BS, so I hung up again. After doing that 5 or 6 times, I finally got the truth, or at least as close as I was going to get. He had done ecstasy with 2 other women, and had a 3 score the night before. Thankfully, I figured it out the next day because he also got an STD from one of them. Story 8. The women reached out to me by text. Directly asked if I was seeing Dude. I was hesitant, and knew I didn't want to converse with her about details about me or my relationship with Dude. She openly spoke about them. I only asked, "What did he cook for you?" Some items lined up. Time frame? Did he go a trip with family? Yes. The destination matched what he told me. Have you met family? She? No. I have. She then says I wish I didn't give him a set of pans. And that was all the confirmation I needed because I used those pans 2 weeks before she reached out. I remember asking him how he got the pans and he said off Marketplace. I asked casually, the way he answered felt off then 2 weeks before. Thanked her and never contacted her again. Broke up with him by text. I don't think he knew the pans was the evidence unless she told him. Story 9. She was so absolutely, utterly shamelessly banging her roommate while in a 5+ year long-distance relationship with me. It happened for more than a year and was so bad her best friend basically straight up told me when I asked. For the whole year, I planned to move to her city, which I did just before finding out. I found out literally hours ago. Didn't get any sleep tonight, and I'm currently waiting for her to wake up, go online on WhatsApp so I can pick up my stuff and never see her again. Story 10. Flew across the country to be with my mom as she passed. Couldn't get in touch with my boyfriend back home, but didn't try incredibly hard as I was overwhelmed with everything else. He claimed to be very upset that I didn't try harder in the night before I flew back, day after mom passed. He exploded saying I shouldn't come back home at all. The day I flew back home, I did my laundry, pulled a pair of underwear out of my pile that I didn't recognize. Started to ask him to ask our roommate if they were hers, but before I could get it out of my mouth, boyfriend explodes at me about how I'm accusing him of cheating. Also noticed he'd washed the bedding, which he'd never done before. Let it go due to exhaustion, or rather, let it stew. A week later, boyfriend picks another explosive fight via text. As I'm responding to the string of incredibly mean texts, he sends me an out-of-tone text that is talking about things he wants to do with, whoever the text was actually meant for, and his 18-year-old coworker, we were 30 at the time. This text was a book about how much fun he had with her in our bed, while my mother was dying, and how he couldn't wait to add the 18-year coworker old to the mix. All while he was texting me some of the meanest thing I'd ever read. We'd been together for 4 years. Story 11. I always got the sense he was full of BS, so early on I was watching for the signs. Call it intuition, but I woke up in the morning to a text asking me if I was traveling to see my sister, 2-hour journey. I didn't drive at the time, so I called my mom and explained I knew deep down something was happening that day. Having been cheated on herself by my father without hesitation, she agreed to drive me over an hour to his place of work, and we waited until he finished. He called me and said his mum was seriously ill, so he was going to stop off at hers on the way home from work to make sure she was okay. We watched him get in his car, drive around the corner to a local train station where he stopped, and some random guy skipped towards the car and got in. We followed them all the way home and confronted them both on his drive in front of all of his neighbors, Jerry Springer style. The worst thing about it, the dude he was planning on hooking up with looked around 16 when the confrontation started. This poor boy hightailed it, walking away in a completely unfamiliar place. While I had it out with my now ex, my mum found the boy walking on the road. She took him to the train station and gave him money for a train. It was the most satisfying moment of my life. All those doubts I had were confirmed. Though it was hard going, I learned that day to always trust my instincts. Story 12. After catching the two of them in bed together, breaking up and taking him back, I was of course suspicious. I don't even know how I knew to do this, but I found chat logs of MSN Messenger on the computer and read their chats. I confronted him when he came home, and he told me that my jealousy was ruining our marriage. I think the cheating is what did it. When I caught them in bed together, I had been staying at my parents' to give each of us some space. I got a weird feeling and drove to our house and walked in the front door. He came to the top of the stairs, all bare, and tried to talk me into leaving. Of course, I ran up to the bedroom, but it was empty. I found her in the ensuite. I kept questioning him about his relationship with her, and he had been telling me it was all in my head. He made me think it was my fault that we were growing apart and becoming distant with each other. I think it was the cheating, story 13. We had been burgled, and I was trying to call him at work. It was a Saturday morning. I was a regular at a library about 200 yards from his work, so I called the library and asked if someone would be kind enough to nip down there and pass on a message for me. Someone called me back and said they had been to his work, but there wasn't a soul there. No lights on, all doors locked, no cars in the car park. It was definitely closed. I waited for him to get home from work and asked where he'd been. He said he'd been at work. I told him what I had asked the library to do. He knew what I was getting at. He knew I'd caught him. He said he didn't have time for this nonsense because he had to go back to work. He had only called in to pick something up. I told him if he left now I wouldn't be there when he got back, and he told me he loved me but had to go. He left, so I moved out that night. I found the truth out by accident about 2 weeks later. He wasn't just cheating on me, he was cheating with me. I was a side piece. He had never left his wife officially. His wife was pregnant with his son. We'd lived together for over a year at this point, and the girl that he said was his cousin's girlfriend was also one of his bits on the side. I was absolutely crushed. I walked to the house I was told he lived in and left a note on his car saying I knew what he had done then, had a sad walk home, and was picked up by a taxi driver that felt sorry for me. I also found out he had been lying to me from day one. I was 17 when we got together. He said he was 26. Turned out he was 30 when we met. Then I found out he had been defrauding my family, and even 13 years after we had split up, my parents were still getting debt collection letters to their address. He forged my dad's signature on an HP car purchase, stopped paying for the car, then sold it. I won't tell you everything he did, but he is the sole reason why my little brother's body rotted in a morgue for 3 months after he offed himself. Story 14, not me. But I do know someone who once got an email from someone she'd never heard of or met. As it turns out, her husband had been hooking up with this guy regularly for several months under the guise of being recently divorced. So when the guy found out he was very much not divorced or even in the process of doing so, he gathered up receipts and dropped them on the missus. He had sent screenshots of texts discussing where, when to hook up. She matched them to dates that he was late, delayed from work, and that was it. The photos and videos he sent along were just extra evidence, just in case the texts weren't enough. From what I heard, the lawyer meetings got spectacularly awkward because while she did tell him about the texts she got, she did not tell him about the photos and videos until the lawyers got involved. Story 15, went to check our mailbox late one night. There was a piece of mail in there from my ex, we lived together, addressed to someone else that the USPS sent back to us because it hadn't been processed and stamped properly. I assumed it had something to do with her job because she gets a lot of work-related mail and works for an international company with employees in various states in the US. I was originally just going to restamp it and take care of it the next day. I threw it in my car and went to bed. I woke up randomly in the middle of the night with an awful gut feeling. Went back out to the car and looked up the person's name and address. They were following each other on Instagram, and the address appeared to be this person's house. I did not recognize them at all, and she had never mentioned him before. We talked about her job all the time because it was a really cool job and company, so I found it concerning that this person didn't ring any bells. The next morning, I decided, F it, I'll open it. And if my assumption was correct that it was just work stuff, I just re-envelope it and make sure it got sent properly. Technically, no harm, no foul in that scenario. Opened it on the way to work. It was a note with her perfume and kiss markings on the paper. Also, inside was an explicit Polaroid photo she had given me years ago, and a pin she bought at an event she recently attended. We had even recently discussed how I was hurt and offended that she hadn't picked a gift, specifically with me in mind from this event, because it was a hobby I was very interested in, and had actually gotten her into as well, a hobby we spent years enjoying together. This event was one of the biggest aspects of that hobby. I unfortunately could not afford to go. I was devastated. I knew we had our problems, but I was actively working on improving our relationship and myself, even though she had been checked out for about 6 months by that point. She was just a coward who couldn't face the reality that she didn't want to be with me anymore and made me suffer for it. Story 16. I had to work later than my ex, but I trusted her and told her to go out. I'd meet up with her once I was done. She went to the bar with her female coworker right after work, around 9:30 to 10 p.m. I had met this coworker before, so all was good. I finally got to the bar around 12 a.m., midnight. I saw my ex and her coworker at a table with three guys I didn't know. The coworker said they were friends of hers and wanted to hang out. My ex was wasted when I got there, like sloppy drunk. It didn't make sense because she could usually hold her own. I also noticed her coworker and the three guys watching my ex's phone. When I looked, the coworker said, "Oh, I'm showing them this Tosh Digger clip." I replied, "Then use one of the other four phones on that side of the table," and took my ex's phone. As soon as I did that, each of the guys started saying their goodbyes and left in a bit of a hurry. Even her coworker immediately got on her phone and started calling for a ride, which seemed weird. You wanted to go out drinking, and after 2 hours, you all immediately want to leave when I get there. They all left, and I asked my ex what was up. She said she didn't know. I asked her why they were so interested in her phone. She again said she didn't know, so I opened her phone and went to her photos. And sure enough, there was a video. It seemed the guys had gotten both of them so drunk that my ex, her coworker, and one of the guys went into the ladies' bathroom. The girls took their shirts off and started having fun with each other, all while a guy I didn't know was standing there filming it on my girlfriend's phone. I sent myself a copy of the video because I knew when she woke up, she would delete it and never admit it happened. I closed her phone, told her to get up, and drove her home. Once home, I told her, "Don't ever call me again." She was confused and said, "I thought that's what guys wanted." I told her she had a lot to learn and I left. The next morning, I woke up to a ton of texts and missed calls from her. Finally, she called again, sounding painfully hungover, asking what happened last night. I explained everything, and she didn't believe me. I told her to open her photos and she'd see the video. I heard her see it, say OMG, and then I could hear her delete the video and say, "See, it's all gone, no problems." I just kind of laughed and said, "That's not how that works." I told her she had already sent me a copy, so it didn't just disappear. I told her that if she wanted to continue our relationship, she was going to need to stop drinking. She refused, so we broke up. She then threatened to tell everyone a BS reason why we broke up. I had to remind her, "Hey, genius, I have the video of what actually happened. You can lie about it to people, and I can expose you for lying, or you can just keep your mouth shut. Your choice." Bullet dodged. Story 17. I called him the day after his birthday, no response whatsoever. I put it off for a couple of hours, then tried again. Still no answer, but I did get a call from another number. I don't like answering numbers I don't know, but this one was adamant, so I answered. "Me. Who is this?" "Them, Chris's girlfriend." "Me. That's funny, because I'm Chris's girlfriend." Hung up. The number called back. I answered and she said, "Just listen." In the background, she was chewing someone out and asking if he was cheating on her. I heard Chris respond and say, "You already know the answer." Something literally snapped in my brain during that phone call. I developed an eating disorder and haven't been the same since Trustwise. I had been dating him for a year, while he had a whole girlfriend of 6 years that he was living with. The whole thing messed me up royally. I had been to his house and met his family. There were no signs of another woman. I even brought my clothes to keep at his house. Others knew about us dating, and her too. Story 18 found out my boyfriend of 2 years, who was talking about marriage, was in fact already happily married and had been for many years. So, not only was I devastated to learn I was being cheated on, but the fact that I was the side piece was even more disorienting. I kept a poker face the next couple of days until I could find out her name and where she worked. I showed up and asked to speak with her privately. I broke the news as gently as I could, saying how sorry I was that this was happening to her, and making very clear that I would never have knowingly done that to her. I had been tricked into thinking I was in a monogamous, long-term, serious, and committed relationship. The lady was distraught and messaged him to meet her at home right freaking now. I left, and dude called me a few minutes later to say a family emergency came up and we wouldn't be able to get together later. He didn't know yet that I was his family emergency. That was a glorious day. Story 19 years ago, my ex and I lived together. We had met while waiting tables at Olive Garden. I had left and since started working for EMS. She worked in the to-go section mostly, which was in an area of the building with terrible service. So traditionally, if we needed to contact each other, it would be through the restaurant phone. She was working a later shift, and I was at home. It started getting later and later, and normally I'd have heard from her. I called the restaurant, and they said she had left a few minutes ago. It was around 11 p.m., then it got to midnight, and she still wasn't home. We lived maybe 15 minutes from the restaurant. She finally got home around 12:30 a.m. I could immediately tell that I was upset. She said she got off, wanted to eat, and have some time to herself, so she went to Boston Market across the street. I politely told her that when she wanted to tell me the truth, I'd be here, which I think just ate at her. What she didn't realize until I threw it out as checkmate is that I used to love Boston Market and I happened to know that particular one closed at 9:30. She told me that one of her coworkers, also my old coworker, pulled her aside to tell her he was in love with her. But all she did was shut him down for hours. A month later, we had a nasty breakup. 2 days after we broke up, he posted a photo of her on Instagram. They ended up having 2 kids together and then split because he cheated on her half a dozen times. Dodged a bullet with that one. Story 20. I was working from home on a Friday, which I usually never do, and my husband, who had gone out the night before, which I knew, and even though I wasn't really happy about him partying all night on a Thursday, it was not a big deal, came home around 8 a.m. He was very surprised to find me working. He said, "Oh, well, since you're home, I'll go to the boulangerie and we can have breakfast together." I thought it was a little suspicious, but never mind. Then my concierge called me and told me that a guy was waiting on another floor. She said he came with my husband and was just waiting for him. She told me she kicked him out because he was just wandering around and was high. When my husband came back from the boulangerie, we had a nice chat. At least there were croissants. Story 21. Where do I begin? One guy I was long distance with started acting very weird the morning he was supposed to be flying to see me. He was still in bed an hour before his flight, but he said he'd make it somehow. Okay. My gut immediately told me he's already in the country. He would usually send me his boarding pass, so I had the flight details to track, but this time he refused and flipped out at me, saying he always had to prove himself. I'd never asked him for proof of anything before. Anyway, he went fully silent on me. Then, hours after he was landed, I got a copy of the boarding pass. The idiot had just edited an old one and I spotted it straight away, same seat numbers, and he'd put times for gate close and departure that just didn't make sense. I scanned the barcode on the pass, and surprise, surprise, it was an old one he'd already sent me when we met in a different city. He had told me he'd spent the night before in the hospital with his sick mum, but actually he was already here with another girl he'd been seeing. I later found out who she was and confirmed it all with her. Another guy went distant because apparently he was dealing with his dad having cancer and being in his final days. But his actions were still odd, and his story didn't add up about a girl I saw him with in a photo. Long story short, I trusted my gut and messaged her. They'd been together for 4 years. I'd been staying in their apartment, in which he'd removed all trace of her while she was away with the army. Also, his dad didn't have cancer, it was just a sick cover story. Lying about a parent being ill is next level, and I've had it happen twice. Story 22. Well, my ex-wife cheated like a dozen or more times, so I have a few to share. The craziest would probably be the breaking and entering one. It was actually Valentine's Day, and my ex and I had gone out to dinner. We came home and found my dog on the back porch chewing on crab legs, Alaskan crab legs. Also on the back porch was a half-eaten bowl of cereal. Apparently she'd been having an affair with a coworker, who probably didn't know she was married. He came to the house to surprise her on Valentine's Day with one of her favorite meals. The dude let himself into our house. He probably realized, whoa, this chick is married, threw the crab legs in the backyard, helped himself to a bowl of cereal because he was hungry, and bounced, leaving the evidence of his visit behind on purpose. Honestly, not even mad, bro. The rest aren't as crazy, just stupid stuff. Cheaters are either stupid or just want to get caught. Technology is a big one. My stupid ex had signed in to our son's tablet, which then synced her account to that device. She downloaded her cloud photo albums to the tablet. Good thing our 3 to 4-year-old didn't fully understand the pictures he was exposed to. Technology really doesn't let you get away with anything. You can check the router for logs, sites visited, and which devices connect. You can track phone locations. If on shared plans, you can get the numbers the phones texted and the timestamps. I have a fair amount of land and let a neighbor hunt on my property. He set up trail cams and would get pictures of deer or bears sent to his phone, or random dudes driving up my driveway while I'm at work. There are other stories, less interesting. It is what it is. Yes, I'm sure most of you are thinking, how could I stay with a serial cheater? Serial cheater, it took me almost 10 years to come up with that pun, but there were kids involved. We did therapy individually and as a couple, you name it. I had my reasons. The story had a happy ending for me, though. She pulled the going to the store for milk and eggs trick, leaving me and the kids whoosh gone. She just left a 1-paragraph note behind. Didn't want custody, didn't want money, just didn't want to be a mother or wife anymore. I took it all if I waived child support from her. Easiest divorce ever. Story 23, my credit card company called me about possible fraud on my account. It turned out that lingerie had been purchased from Victoria's Secret in the town where my then-husband was working. The young lady on the phone tried to play it off, saying that since it wasn't my size, I asked her. Maybe it was for his mother or sister. EW, I told her, obviously it was not me making the purchase, since I had answered her call at my work number, and I canceled the card. A little while later, my husband called me because the credit card wasn't working at the gas station. I told him I had canceled it because of the purchase at the Victoria's Secret store. Obviously, it had been stolen. He went quiet, then asked how he was supposed to buy gas. I told him to ask his girlfriend and hung up. Story 24, lent her my SUV for a prime summer weekend trip from north of Boston to allegedly visit her brother in the Hudson Valley. The The car GPS tag tracked to New London, Long Island Ferry parking. So weird. She was headed to the Hamptons. I texted her brother. They were away on the West Coast. She had been going to NYC monthly on the regular to see friends with no social posts. It was now all adding up, meeting her friends in the Hamptons. I bribed a good buddy with a hard luck tale, plus Bourbon Stowe lift ticket to take me to New London and retrieve the car. She called me when she got back to the New London Ferryport Sunday night. Now with the car gone, spinning some jacked up BS tale, I said, "You're a liar and a cheater. Figure out how to get back OYO and GFY." I moved out, never spoke again. No therapy, no apologies, all done. Turns out she had been seeing some dude in New York the whole time, 6 to 7 years, as some scorched ex-friends of hers later revealed. Story 25, a long time ago. I worked at a Palm store, a what you say? A store that sold Palm Pilots and Trio phones, ask your parents. One day, this absolutely stunning Asian woman walked into the store and asked me how she could see the photos stored on her phone. I didn't even think twice because I must have gotten this question 100 times a day. See? When you had an SD card in the phone for extra storage, you had to switch over to it to see what was stored on the card. I changed it over and handed it back to her. She started looking through the photos and then just burst out crying. Turns out it was her husband's phone, and on there were a bunch of pics of him with another woman. Whoops. Later that evening, we got a call at the store from the husband. He wanted to talk to the guy, me, who ratted him out. After yelling and threatening me over the phone for a minute, I finally said to him, "You're the idiot who cheated on his wife and took photos of it, so don't blame me. Also, your wife is gorgeous and the woman in the photos looked like a hag, so clearly your judgment is crap." He hung up and I never heard about it again. Story 26. An old ex-girlfriend of mine was becoming distant and texting a coworker more and more, but constantly said things like, "I don't like him, he smokes and that's gross, he's got kids," etc. Well, one night she was being shady and said she was going to go for a walk in our apartment complex. I decided to follow her outside, where I saw her get into a very familiar blue car that belonged to the guy I wasn't supposed to worry about. She saw me just standing there, got out, and said it wasn't what it looked like, that he needed to talk about his marriage, and he only trusted her, blah blah blah. Well, it turns out after I said I didn't believe her, she told me it was just a small kiss, that it didn't mean anything, and she didn't know why she did it. We went back into the apartment and I started packing my things while she cried the entire time. Snot running down her nose, all while telling me she wouldn't do it again and didn't know what got into her. I gave her a hug the next morning and told her I wasn't mad, that if he made her happy then I wasn't one to stand in the way or be part of a love triangle. My parents drove 4 hours to pick me up and help me haul my things back to their place. Before I left, she was sitting in her car and I told her she probably didn't want to be around when my mom showed up. She asked if there was anything she could do. I told her no. She asked if she could have one last kiss. I really considered it because I loved her, but I painfully told her no, that it wasn't a good idea, and she asked if she would ever see me again. I said I highly doubt it, and I left. Story 27. The other woman called me to tell me she was in the ER miscarrying his baby and that she thought I deserved to know, since he was driving there to see her when he had told me he was just chilling at his house. Mind you, she had several months beforehand to tell me as well, but didn't think it was important until that most dramatic moment. I am by no means putting the sole blame on her. He sucks and was terrible, but she also sucks a little too because she knew the entire time she was getting with him and pregnant with his child that I was his girlfriend and knew nothing about her. It was honestly creepy. This person I didn't even know existed called me and talked to me like she knew everything about my relationship. That was how I knew. They just sat around and talked about me and my relationship whenever she was with him. It was very unsettling. Story 28. I snooped on her WhatsApp. I know I shouldn't have, but I had a feeling. I saw an ongoing conversation with a guy she used to meet. Nothing in there suggested they were meeting. It seemed to just be flirty texting. I confronted her, and after a long conversation, she asked me to give her a second chance and promised she would cut the messaging dead. A few weeks went by, but I just couldn't shake the feeling that I was being lied to. When I got the opportunity, I snooped again, and sure enough, it hadn't stopped. I proceeded to do a little online investigation through Facebook and found out he was married with kids. I contacted his wife on Messenger and told her that her husband had been having an ongoing, interesting conversation with my now ex-girlfriend, and that she should chat with him about it. I left it at that and never knew what the fallout was. Story 29. When my ex-wife and I were about 6 years into our marriage, we had 2 children together, and the marriage was healthy. Or so I thought. I was happy, and she seemed happy anyway. One afternoon, I was finishing up some work in my home office when she came in from work, gave me a hug and a kiss like normal. We exchanged pleasantries asking about each other's days, also like normal. She said she was about to get in the shower but was having trouble with some issue with her phone. I can't remember what now. Hands it to me and asks if I can fix it for her while she showers. I oblige and take her phone. She heads for the shower. While I was fiddling with the settings, she got a text message. We had never gone through each other's phones, although we did know the passcodes, because we trusted each other and didn't think snooping was necessary until it was. I couldn't help but see the text preview pop up at the top. It was from an unsaved number, but what caught my attention was the first part of the message. "Hey cutie, do you like wine and cheese?" I couldn't help but click on the message, and when I did, I read something about enjoying seeing her the other day at the park, and something about their kids playing together so well. I was perplexed, needless to say. When she got out of the shower, I immediately asked if she had met someone at the park whose kids got along with ours. She went white as a sheet and said she didn't know what I was talking about. I handed her the phone back and said, "Well, he wants to know if you like wine and cheese." She immediately started frantically going through her phone, saying she didn't know who this was, yada yada yada. I was disturbed, but since I trusted her and had no previous reason to doubt her, I told myself maybe it was a wrong number. Not a week later, I got a long message on Facebook from someone I didn't know. It started out, "Hi, you don't know me, but we have a lot in common," and went on to say that her husband and my wife had been sleeping together for months and that she had a mountain of evidence to prove it. Turns out I knew her husband quite well because he was someone my wife talked about a lot from work, a fellow nurse. In the end, it turned out she had been cheating on me with several married men she worked with at the hospital, and goodness knows who else. I promptly got checked for STDs and got legally separated. Then divorced, a dark spot in my life to say the least. Story 30, my ex, 6 months after getting married, came to me and told me she had been dating a man, we are both women, for months, and was asking for my permission to sleep with him. I told her she wasn't going to get my permission, and she claimed that because we had previously talked once in passing about what if we did a three-score, I had given her my permission and she was just wanting to check in again. After I didn't let that obvious gaslighting pass, the man was trying to convince her that I was abusive and that she needed to leave. Mind you, we were long distance due to work and school at the time, and I was paying for her entire life and her school. Anyways, she supposedly broke it off with him. I let it go since they hadn't been physical, supposedly. But then, when I went to visit her, she introduced me to a man with the same name and tried to convince me he was a different guy. We ended up agreeing to a divorce, and she went to sleep at that guy's house. They were 1000% banging. I know it. I just can't prove it. Story 31, he was showering and left his phone on the kitchen counter. A text came up from a girl talking about how much fun she had with him the weekend before, which was the weekend I went home to visit family. I asked, and she was just a friend that I had never heard about in almost 1.5 years of dating. A few months later, he dumped me to date, then marry her. He popped up on my socials a decade later, and I got nosy. He ended up getting super jacked, divorced his wife, and is now trying to be a gym influencer. I feel sorry for her and their 2 kids. He kind of was a piece of crap, and if they hadn't cheated and left me, I would have married him. As it is, my life took such a different turn that I'm so grateful it all went down like it did, but I remember a whole year in my early 20s not being able to eat or sleep after that cheating and breakup. Story 32. I had an out-of-the-blue dream one night about my first love, then boyfriend, who was, up until that point, a stellar boyfriend and overall great guy, but we were both young. In my dream, he cheated on me with a girl I had reservations about. The next morning, I called him on my break at my retail job. He picked up, and I just flat out asked, "Did you cheat on me with her?" He got very silent. A couple of beats went by, and then he finally answered, "Yes." There was no reason for me to suspect it, and up until that point, they hadn't been carrying on any communication or affair. I had my own reservations about her because we didn't get along in high school. Anyway, he cheated, fessed up to it. I hung up and cried my eyes out for months. They eventually started dating, crushing, to nobody's surprise. They didn't make it past the 6-month mark. It's been 10 plus years since this happened. We were young and I was waiting for it to happen, so perhaps it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. But the dream was crazy. I knew before I picked up the phone to call him what the answer already was. Sigh. Young love. Devastating. Story 33. I have two. Short and sweet. The first one was my ex of 8 years. Long story short, she went out and didn't come home and wouldn't respond to texts. I didn't sweat it. I could see on Snapchat she was at an unknown address all night. A simple Google search showed the last name of a certain male coworker friend of hers. Best part, it was his mom's house. She came home and told me she had passed out at a friend's house, a girl, and talked about how much she loved me, blah blah. I let her talk before showing her the screenshot of her location and who it belonged to. The color drained from her face. Long story short, we broke up, and she had a baby with that person before cheating on him the same way she did me. Ironic. The second one is simple. I dropped her off at her car, which was already at the party she wanted to go to. I wanted to play a game of Brawl Stars. I loved the game, and she hated it, so I had been eager to play a bit. My best friend's mom lived about 8 blocks down from this party, so I parked around the corner from his house to play a few ranked matches. About 10 minutes later, she parked in front of his house and went in. I took a picture and called her, but no answer. The next day, I brought it up to her, and she tried to deny it. But I had a photo. FBI style, cheaters are stupid. Story 34 in college. My girlfriend was a big partier. Not so much. She would often go out on Fridays and Saturdays, girls' nights. You know the kind of thing. One of our friends was always the DD, as she was sober, but she wouldn't always go with them, just pick them up as she always slept badly and was usually awake anyway. I was used to my girlfriend getting in at 2 to 5 a.m. and joining me in bed. One time, she got in at around 8 a.m. I was already up and getting ready. She played it off, long night partying, the usual. The DD friend later told me that she did pick up my girlfriend from the club at around 4 a.m. I felt something was off, but she didn't want to tell me. After some pressuring, I found out that my girlfriend had begged her to drop her off at some random guy's house. She said no initially, but my girlfriend was very difficult when drunk. Saying no to her would end up in something bad happening. The guy? A football player, her ex? I never found out exactly what happened, and she denied anything untoward, just wanted to hang out with him at 4 a.m. We stayed together about 6 more months. Stupid, I know, but had to end it whenever she drank, which was frequently. She would become a completely different person and do crazy stuff. Story 35. She told me there's this large company whose headquarters is not very far from here. Most people in my area know it as a great place to work with lots of perks. When I got on there, I heard from so many people that they had applied repeatedly but had never so much as gotten a call back. Point is, employment there is semi-coveted, and when my then-girlfriend bragged about it to her mom, her response was that her friend's son also worked there. My girlfriend asked me if I had met anyone with their last name. I told her that I hadn't, that it was a big company, and she told me to be on the lookout because his mom and her mom were friends. It was weird, but whatever. I filed it away and went about life. Fast forward several months, and my girlfriend was upset at me for not wanting to pay for her to take a trip to a beach with her friends. I thought we worked past that fight, and she asked me to come over and greeted me with a shit-eating grin. She boasted that she had slept with Caleb Woods, not his real name. I was angry that she had cheated on me, but also confused as I didn't know who Caleb Woods was. She said it like I should know who this was, like he was famous and I should be proud of her for landing him. Lauren Woods' son, he works with you. I told her I didn't know who she was talking about, but wished them all the best. We were done. I left her house. She followed me out, telling me that she hopes I think about him giving it to her every time I see him at work. A few months go by, and I'm in the break room talking to a guy from the mailroom, Matt Woods. He mentions his brother started dating a crazy woman. Things start to click. I ask his brother's name. It's Caleb. I ask if Caleb works with us. Matt tells me he doesn't. He used to work at Walmart, but he got fired and started to DoorDash until his car got repossessed. Now he's doing nothing. At this point, I'm left to presume that my entitled ex-girlfriend heard Lauren's son works there too, and didn't realize this woman had 2 sons. She went out of her way to sleep with him because she thought we were coworkers, only to realize later it was the wrong one. Story 36. He was in the shower, and his phone was going crazy on the bed. I just took a peek and saw some texts that immediately set my spidey senses tingling. I opened it up. He had sent his ex, whom he was still friends with, a photo of a woman who was definitely not me, along with a smiley face. That was it. His ex was incredibly surprised, asked what happened to me, which is what caught my eye in the first place, and was alarmed. I confronted him, and he said she was a friend he hadn't seen in eons. It didn't sit right, but I was naive and dumb, and we had been together 5 years at that point with not even a whiff of infidelity prior to then. A month later, a friend of mine invited me to lunch and asked me how I would handle things with a friend if I had noticed their significant other kissing someone else. I immediately said I would tell them because I'd want to know, even if it would break their heart or make them mad. Well, yes, obviously it would be hard, but it's the right thing to do. So she told me what she saw and I was floored. I went home and confronted him. He denied it. I asked for her name. He never gave it. I left. A few years later, I found out they got married in Vegas, even though he was always a I will never ever get married kind of guy. How quaint. Anyway, best thing that ever happened to me. Story 37. About a year into a relationship that wasn't working well, I finally asked for a break from my boyfriend, telling him I needed a week and would call him the following Sunday. On Saturday of the same week, I was looking through our text conversations, searching for reasons to leave or not leave, I guess, when I went way back and found a text with an address he had sent himself to remember. This was his friend's address, a friend he would have dinner with once or twice a week when he was working in her town. She was a friend he had introduced me to early on in our relationship, and while meeting her at dinner, she proceeded to flirt with my boyfriend while I was there, and her boyfriend, or her poly-boyfriend, we weren't sure. She treated me like I wasn't even at that dinner. I was sitting right across from her at a small table. By the way, I'm not poly. Okay, so this bothered me immensely. For a year, I brought it up that I didn't like it. Maybe 3 or 4 times. Subtly, though, I didn't want to make him mad or seem jealous. I loved him at the time. I know, lesson learned. Anywho, back to the text. I was heartbroken. I knew our relationship wasn't working, but I loved him. I don't know why. But I Googled the address and clicked the Google Street View image. Then I rotated the address image, and lo and behold, his very specific car was parked on her street. My stomach dropped. Then I looked up the date of the image. It was dated only a few months earlier. The month that I had really let him know how much it hurt me that he still kept hanging out with her. He had agreed to not see her anymore, and his ass lied about it when I confronted him that night. Ended things right there. Adios. Mentiroso. Story 38. Sitting in bed, I was doing something on my phone that required me to take a note, so I grabbed the iPad to do so. It was signed in with his Apple ID, but it was a house use item. Apple will sync some things between devices when signed in. When I opened the Notes app, there was a note that said, "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to be with you." I got a really bad feeling. I got up and walked over to his side of the bed where his phone was. I looked, and he was in the kitchen microwaving a Cinnabon. In the 5 years we'd been together, I had never once looked at his phone. Guess he was super comfortable in that, as I didn't even have to snoop. As soon as I opened it, it was still on a text message to his boss that said, "I wish I was laying in bed with you." Written while sitting in bed with me, I held on to the end of the bed, fighting passing out. The room was spinning. He walked back in the room with a fork in his mouth. I accused him. I'll never forget the stupid what look on his face with that fork hanging from his mouth. Totally off guard. Never expected to get caught. Turns out he'd been cheating with various people the entire time we were together. As I followed him through the house, asking all the questions one would ask, he tried to turn it around on me for going through his phone. I never got so angry in my life. Red hot rage. Never been that angry before or since. I needed to hit something. It was either him or the wall. Should have hit him. I shattered my hand hitting a stud. Required 6 months and surgeries, and my hand still isn't right. They actually said I'd never have use of it again, but that turned out to be not entirely true. Insult to injury, we had retreated to different areas after that, and it took me about 30 minutes for the hand pain to start. It had immediately gone numb after hitting. I realized I had likely broken it and had to ask him to help me put on a coat and take me to the hospital. Honestly, it made everything easier because they kept me hopped up on good drugs, and lots of them. Story 39. About 15 years ago, I was dating a woman for about a year. She found a home with her mother and was pushing me to move in. I was thinking about it, I just didn't want to rush. Then we didn't see each other for about a week. She told me she had picked up a bunch of shifts at work and was going to be too busy. I said, "Cool, I'll do the same thing. Let us get a nest egg going." I ran into a mutual friend who worked with my girlfriend and mentioned how my girlfriend had picked up a ton of shifts. The mutual friend let me know that my girlfriend actually gave away all of her shifts that week. Turns out she met somebody. Oh, of course there were the waterworks when I dumped her. But she shacked up with him. The relationship had taken a pretty big hit a month before. We were out in a bar with a bunch of mutual friends, and she decided to tell everyone that she had had a devil's three-way in college. That's 2 guys, 1 woman. This went over quite poorly with pretty much everybody there. We had a deal never to talk about past history. I was embarrassed, friends were angry. And it wasn't just the guys, the girls also thought it was a really cruel thing she did. So, things might not have been going as well as I thought they were, and it was probably for the best that things ended. I'm pretty sure she wound up with somebody more compatible anyway. Story 40. I always suspected he was cheating but couldn't find evidence. I was at work one morning at a call center for a utility company and got a call through my headset. I froze when I saw his number pop up on the screen. So, I go through my rundown. "Thanks for calling, blah blah. This is, how can I help you?" A girl responds, asking for an extension on her bill. She tells me her name, and it was the girl I suspected he was cheating with. Weeks before, my mom told me to sit back and wait for the proof to come and stop looking for it, and it definitely did. We had 3 call centers in different areas of the state, and somehow she happened to come through to me. It was fate. Of course, he denied it and said she was just a friend and needed to use his phone. But best friend had already told on him. LOL, he ended up having a baby with my cousin who was originally underage when she first met him. He waited until she turned 18. Now has about 12 kids with 8-9 different women. Glad I got out of there. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.